What do you
Hi.
think? Hi, what do you think is more important, risk or governance? Risk or compliance, Chloe?
Oh, that's a good question. But as GRC consultants, we do all of the three letters.
Okay.
So I would like to say I have a preference for compliance because of what I do, but risk is just as important. We can't
Okay.
say that all of GRC. It's the very politically correct answer.
That's a
for
very
GRC.
politically correct response. Yeah. We want spiciness. Now, this is your first talk, I understand.
Yes, it is.
Awesome. So everyone be very nice. It's always good to
Oh.
get new speakers. I think we have about a quarter to half of the people here are new speakers, of which I've just noticed Chloe anyway, who's going to be talking to us about credit cards, which is awesome. Now, the reason that's awesome to me is I recently bought a flipper, and so learning the whole thing of like, oh, I can scan this and I can make this happen, and then I found things on my credit card that I'm like, what the hell? So I think this talk is going to be very helpful to explain what are the things that happen. So, and there's a lot of people saying you're going to be amazing. So go for it. It's all yours.
All right. Well, we won't get into the nitty-gritty of it. It's a pretty beginner type of talk, but let's start. So, credit cards, right? You know, those rectangular things that are used as a form of payment that we find commonplace in Australia and all around the world to pay for goods and services. It's interesting how much credit cards are a form of convenience, but have also been made into a status symbol. I mean, we've all heard of the famous black card, correct? But regardless of what you think, credit cards are a huge facet of people's lives. Like, not even just credit cards, but debit cards and store cards as well, which are all payment cards in the end. We use them so much, so seamlessly as well, that we don't often think about what happens with our details or security when employing them in our day-to-day lives, nor about the many ways we can pay through a so-called PIN pad or FPOS device. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So if you aren't interested in credit cards, credit card security, and some GRC-related things to do with credit cards, I would maybe start dinner again, maybe go away for a bit. But for those of you that do stay, hi, my name is Chloe Pang, and I will be your presenter and your tour guide today, and to take you on this magical journey about credit cards and payment cards. Why am I allowed to do so? Well, blame the people that accepted my talk. They apparently thought I had the credentials. Thankfully, I did not lie on my biography section. I am a GRC consultant at this firm called CyberCX, and they were the lovely company that handcuffed me to this wonderful framework called PCI DSS. And naive little me did not recognize that I'd be trapped with PCI DSS for 2 years non-stop project work. Since then, I've also received my AQSA from the PCI Council and my ISO 27001 lead auditor. So now I'm obsessed with credit cards and want everyone else to be just as interested as I am in it. And this is totally not a cult, but it definitely could be Stockholm Syndrome. But enough about me. Let's talk about the star of the show. So you're all probably wondering how Mr. Credit Card came to be, how this famous superstar became so prevalent all around the world. Time to talk about credit cards' humble beginnings. The concept of the credit cards we know well of today would have been properly invented when the American Express brought out their first charge card in 1958. However, most would agree that what truly inspired the credit card, and which many consider the birth of the modern charge card, was the store card. The Diners Club card was brought about by Frank McNamara and his business partner Ralph Schneider in 1950, where customers of Diners Club could charge their restaurant meals to their card. So Diners Club would pay on their behalf, but then their customer would need to pay their bill on a monthly basis. Money isn't free after all, am I right? What's also interesting to note is that after American Express brought out their first charge card in 1958, later that same year, California-based Bank of America would issue their paper-based Bank Americard to 60,000 customers, which was great in causing the first known incidents of credit card fraud. But it did create the revolving credit card that we know of today with month-to-month balances and all that. Also, if you thought Americard ended up being dead, you'd be wrong. Bank Americard ended up rebranding to become Visa in 1976. It created the first known cases of credit card fraud, and it's still kicking. What a comeback, really. After Bank Americard ended up being so successful, Interbank card came out in 1966 by a bunch of other California-based banks, which became MasterCard in 1979. And that's it for the history of the Mr. Credit Card. So let's go into the anatomy, shall we? If you've been disconnected from the world for the past 50 years, payment cards and credit cards are rectangular pieces of what used to be paper, but are now more sensible plastic, and even more recently, metal, which has become the more premium option. Now let's go on to what's on a payment card or a credit card, because you'll find many similarities between the two of them. So please take a look at the diagram that I have on the screen. For the front of the card, you'll see the 16-digit number called a card number or primary account number. There's also your cardholder name and expiration date. Those three things you'll know are very integral pieces of what you need when paying for something online. On the front, you'll also see the chip. We'll get into that later. Small things to note is the bank it belongs to and the payment brand or card network it belongs to. Now, if we go to the back of the card, you'll find your signature. If you ever were bothered to write one back there in the first place, there's a magnetic stripe, more on that later. There could also be hologram or contact details depending on the card. Most importantly, there's a security code on the back. You might know it as CVV or CVC with 3 digits, or if you're American Express and you love to be special, it's on the front with 4 digits and called the CID. Infuriatingly, it can be called a bunch of other things. Please see the list on the screen now because I won't list it for you. It'll make me angry. Now, you know what a credit card is. Congratulations. Let's move on. Otherwise, I'll start complaining about CVV naming conventions again. So, how does a credit card attempt to protect itself? Well, let's start at the beginning with the modern magnetic strip, which was invented in 1969 by Forrest Perry, an IBM engineer. It's on the back of your card. It's like a black stripe, and you practically use it when you swipe said card. And it's a rumored tale that Perry's wife, who was ironing at the time, helped with the invention, suggesting that Perry could melt the stripe technology onto the plastic card with an iron. That success led to the convenience of the strip being born. With that success meant certain individuals found ways to steal information at that time, a sophisticated process at the time known as skimming. Having your magnetic stripe skimmed is a be-all end-all because the black tape contains all of your information on your card that matters, and it is also static and remains the same with each swipe. So we're talking your cardholder name, card number, card expiry, any additional information from the bank, and even your lovely security code. You ever wonder why, when you go to certain checkouts, the number at the back of your card is referred to as a CVV2? That's because the first CVV, or CVV1, is actually in your magnetic stripe, and thus CVV2 is actually the 3 numbers on the back. Anyways, skimming became a thing which led to the creation of microprocessors developed in France in 1984, which were embedded into payment cards to be read by specialized payment terminals. This, combined with a PIN or personal identification number, meant it was largely adopted in France by 1994. So, of course, everywhere else decided to come up with their own ones, which led to an issue because no one's microprocessors worked with anyone else's specialized payment terminals. So then the payment processors Europay, MasterCard, and Visa stuck their heads together to create an international global chip specification for payment systems. By 1996, those 3 came out with the first EMV chip technology and PIN system specifications internationally at EMVCo, which is the technical organization founded by the 3 I just mentioned before. I would not give you any extra credit on how they came up with the name EMV. EMV chips are great. They're practically cute, small little computers that have no power source but jump into action near a payment terminal. Thus, EMV chips and PIN alleviated the needs for signatures, helped with offline capabilities with payment terminals to process payments, and aided security because it was harder to skim than the magnetic stripe. It also makes one-time use codes for each transaction, which EMVCo likes to call cryptograms. So even if you do replicate and skim it, it can't be used again due to expiry. Then, the last real big advancement came with the invention of near field communications, or NFC, which meant you didn't even need to put anything into a payment machine through the use of radio frequency and the card's new chip. But we can talk about more about that in the next section. All right, set the scene. You're approaching a store and you see the most common device when doing in-store and in-person payments, the PIN pad or FPOS device. I'll just call it FPOS for the sake of for the rest of this presentation. If you don't know how one works, on a very simple basis, it is a form of payment machine or terminal that will be more than happy to accept your credit card information to send off to the bank to process your transaction. On most traditional machines, you'll be able to swipe your card on the side, insert the card below, or just simply tap on the screen or the contactless icon in the machine. Thus, this is where the title of my presentation comes from. I've probably spoiled my surprise on what method you should use by giving you all an in-depth history lesson and when all of these came out, but I will give you some reasons on the final answer. So, moving on, the simplest forms in order to steal your credit card information is through skimming, which traditionally targets magnetic strips, and if you remember, was the first sophisticated way to commit credit card fraud. If you haven't seen one, it's a pretty simple device to just place on top of an FPOS device and it's swipe card reader. There's been videos where the perpetrator takes minimal time, seconds even, just to place one on without anyone realizing in the store. Even the way it's smoothly done in videos is practically a perfect Nat 20 sleight of hand check for my D&D lovers out there. It's pretty impressive, really, if it weren't for the fact that your money is getting stolen at the end of the day. Also, magnetic stripes are static. They never change, which is also a downside in their court, meaning once they get it, you'll have to change your card in order to stop getting credit card fraud on your own card. Then there is shimming, because you must always innovate when there's money to be made. It's a newer form of technique to steal chip card information from your lovely payment cards and are made to fit into card reader slots at retailers or ATMs. Remember those cryptograms, which meant that EMV chips, meaning you can't duplicate cards? Yeah. The chip card data can still be used to create magnetic stripes, and these card shimmers are usually incredibly thin and minute to slip into slots. What a perpetrator will do is simply try to use the chip they replicated, which won't work due to the cryptogram, and then they'll be prompted to swipe instead, which will work with the duplicated information. Are they as frequently seen as skimmers? No, but there has been a rise in credit card shimming due to the prevalence of using PIN and chip. This situation is really the tragedy of recognizing that you're only as strong as your weakest link. In this case, older brother magnetic stripe is really bringing his younger brother chip down. However, if you just don't interact with the device at all and just tap, your safety is significantly heightened. So please use a contactless payments or tapping when you can, and failing that, use the insert technique. Treat the swipe technique like the plague. Or don't. I'm not the boss of you and whatever you wish to do. Your next question is probably, Chloe, could you still intercept the information if you tap? The answer is, of course. With enough time and effort, I'm sure anything can be cracked into. I'm sure my penetration testers will agree. Finding holes in security is always a chance and never a zero. However, interviewing and researching suggests that doing this will be a lot more sophisticated for most criminals. Requires more recon on the target device and will be way more intrusive than just putting a skimmer or a shimmer on a device, which is a simple slip-on technique. We'd be attempting to have full control on the FPOS device and attempting to decrypt any of the information through the traffic that you can get. Even the newer payment devices which uses Android platforms should be heavily restricted, but if they can be bypassed, then you might be able to intercept the NFC payments. What came out time and time again when I was talking was less about stealing information and more about being able to replicate the relays and falsifying a transaction actually being completed. It would be a long con in comparison to the other two techniques I mentioned. What I'm trying to say is, you can, but the opportunity cost would be a pain in the ass for most criminals, and you'd only successfully crack one device or just pay without having to pay at one store. And that's if the store or retailer doesn't just swap out their device as well, because it broke or had connection issues, which I've heard is very prevalent with FPOS devices. At that point, you may as well just crack into an ATM. But hey, I'm not here to tell you how to steal information or what techniques you should take. To the next section before someone calls the cops on me. Welcome to the GRC or Governance, Risk and Compliance area. The bread and butter of what I do at work and will be continuously chained to like purgatory. But don't worry, I've learned to love it, and you will too, I hope. So, I've done this course that made me be able to call myself an Associate Qualified Security Assessor under the PCISSC, or Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council, which is the council that brought about the internationally used Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, or PCI DSS. I'm recognizing why GRC might be acronym hell for some people now. Anyways, this council was formed by the major payment brands and networks you know and love or hate, which is MasterCard, Visa, American Express, JCB, and Discovery, with the newly added member being UnionPay. All of these brands came together and collectively decided, hey, we should probably make a standard for how people manage credit cards. Otherwise, we will be caught with random fraud and having to replace them. I really don't have the time for that, or the money, or the interest. And everyone in the group nodded in agreement. So they brought out PCI DSS, which is now on its 4th installment in the series. This standard has 12 requirements about rules and standards for networking, vendor defaults, encryption, transmission, anti-malware, software development, authentication, and a bunch of other things. They have a say on how you need to check the devices, payment devices for tampering. They have minimum password requirements and how long logs should be kept for, just to name a few specific ones. This is required for every business that takes credit card information. And what happens if you don't follow those rules, you might ask? Well, you'll face fines, and in the worst case scenario, if you do really, really badly, payment brands giveth and payment brands will taketh away. So no more credit card payments for you until you start behaving. Tragic, isn't it? However, there are actually rules in Australia for payment networks exclusively. One organisation being the Australian Payments Network, where they actually contribute to International Organisation for Standardization, or ISO, on numerous financial standards. They also expect rules and regulations on how payment frames work in terms of cards. Cash, direct debit, and credit checks, if you still use those. They offer their own attestation for approved EFTPOS devices and have helped a lot in making PCI DSS projects a little bit easier in Australia due to security expectations already being in place within our borders alone. Perhaps this is too short and sweet of a section for GRC around credit card payments, but believe me, if I start talking about any of these standards in depth, we would be here for hours, and I've been told that's not a great idea. Hopefully, the next phase will be more fun. Now, we've come to my very favourite section, the Fun Facts Corner, where you will all be trapped with me to listen to facts I find interesting. Let's get started. First one, did you know that, well, yes, credit cards were first invented in America back in 1950s. The invention of credit systems themselves have been around for as long as us civilized humans. The first recorded transaction was 5,000 years ago, when ancient Mesopotamia used clay tablets to trade with a neighboring civilization. Credit itself has been a concept for a while. Second, the famous Centurion Black Card from American Express may have actually been manifested from rumors that there was a super exclusive card that only the wealthiest may own, which was above platinum status. Doug Smith, director of American Express Europe, told Snopes that the rumor wasn't true at the time, but American Express decided to capitalize on the idea anyways, which led to the Centurion's grand reveal in 1999 for only the wealthiest clientele. Third, and my favorite, it is commonly reported that in terms of stolen or duplicated card details on the black market, American credit cards are cheaper than European credit cards. Why is that? Well, if you've ever learned economics, supply and demand, the supply for American credit cards is less scarce as they as a country took longer to use chip and pins and mostly used the swiping method for machines. You can imagine they'd be getting skimmed constantly, thus more supply, lower price. Economics, baby. Finally, that's my talk. I'm glad you stuck around for it, whether willingly or unwillingly. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any in the Discord chat, and I'll get to them when I have the time. Thank you so much for listening to me. Hopefully, if I ever do it in person next time and it's all about GRC, I'll be sure to lock the doors so you can't escape. Thank you.
So, can you just for my own benefit, can you blink twice if you need help?
You've already made it go red.
I'm good.
Um,
I'm good. Do you want me to stare at the screen?
no. Also, are you like this when you're angry as well?
I think so. I reckon. Yeah.
You're
always happy, right? Always happy. Someone said I'd
I
hate to
could
see
stop
Chloe
being
mad,
happy.
and I'm thinking, no, her all the time. We are not mocking you, by the way.
No.
We have
Oh, no,
all been
it's fine.
talking about how amazing this talk has been. Love your energy, love the passion. It is awesome. Like,
You're a better speaker than
very,
Alan.
very entertaining. What a comeback! What a comeback was my favorite line when you talked about, was it Visa?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, yeah, Visa. Yeah. What a comeback.
Yeah,
Yes,
what a
it was
comeback.
with Visa. It's very interesting, actually. The fact that they came back from almost like, I think it rose credit card fraud for the first time by 30% in historical facts.
Nice.
But still, they still exist. They were that popular and that successful to the point that Interbank Card like got inspired off their success.
I have a fact for you.
I would love it.
Which British famous celebrity was done for credit card fraud in the 1970s?
I don't know.
I'll give it a couple of seconds to see if anybody in chat knows. So it's a very famous British person was done for credit card fraud in the 1970s. And again, there was a number of people who's like, credit cards existed that long? And I'm like, yep, definitely did. It's Stephen Fry. So Stephen Fry was in prison in the 1970s for 2 weeks for doing credit card fraud.
But they definitely didn't exist in the 1970s, unless you didn't look at my history section.
Oh, they definitely paid it. I was paying attention, yes. Thank you so much. Ellen is now asserting authority over you, which is just whatever. Sorry, Shanna, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. I've spent my days doing, I used to be a one of the PFI, so doing the digital forensics for credit card fraud. So super interesting stuff. Really, really, really super interesting. What people were doing and how they were getting away with it. So yeah, I could definitely relate to your talk.
Oh, I wouldn't envy being in like a customer service position in a bank when credit card fraud happens.
No.
But, you know, it is what it is. Money.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well,
Thank you
I guess
very
I'll
much.
head off now.
Yes, we will let you disappear to your locked room again to perform more GRC.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.